Hello and welcome to the How to Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Mathew Saur. He is co-founder and partner of Woolery Co, a strategic legal advisory out of New York City. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Can we start with that backstory? Give me a background. Like my favorite joke is you were born and then you ended up on a show about mergers and acquisitions. Could you feel like the dash in between there? Not so much on the born side, but how did you get into mergers and acquisition? What is your history and what are you working on now type of stuff?
Yeah, so I grew up outside of Baltimore. I grew up in the country, kind of northwest of Baltimore. I was a football player, high school, college, ended up going to Teal College, got recruited to go to Teal College, which is Western Pennsylvania, kind of between Pittsburgh, Erie, and Youngstown, up in that area to play. And I had always thought about going to law school, and it was less about mergers and acquisitions and more about wanting to become a sports agent. And that was really at the core of it. And I knew I wasn't going to be a NFL athlete and play long term. And one of my dad's college friends was a fairly successful NFL agent. My dad had always talked about that. It was also around the time where Drew Rosenhaus and some of the other big time kind of agent personalities came onto the scene and were really front and center. And Jerry Maguire was out with Tom Cruise. I thought that was an interesting way to keep the sports piece, but also bring in the business piece into it. And putting deals together, it always fascinated me. And so I went to college there, played football, got hurt my sophomore year, and really kind of doubled down on going to law school. Ended up going to Notre Dame for law school. Around the time I was going there, I actually had a conversation with my dad's friend that I mentioned. And he said to me, look, the business has changed from when you were growing up and when I got into this. It's not the same thing. You should go on the team side or the league side. That's where the money is. That's where the interesting business aspect is. And you should really focus on that. And to do that, you should get into corporate law.
I really just like started trying to look at, well, okay, what area of law would I enjoy? That's why I went out and talked to all these different, probably talked about a dozen people. Started doing the research and found out a lot of the guys just don't practice law anymore.
Yeah, that's right. My business partner went from partner in a big law firm to running M&A at JP Morgan as an investment banker. And you can do that. I always say to people, look, I wouldn't go to law school necessarily to say you're going to go do something else and not be a lawyer for a little bit. But if you're kind of on the fence and you want to do it, it does give you optionality. And I think, and look, I'm biased, obviously, because I am a lawyer, but that's the hard piece, in my view, to learn. The math is fairly straightforward and fairly simple. If you get there's a couple books you can read on it, and you're pretty much there. And then it's just understanding operations and business. But the legal piece is always, it's like a hidden skill a little bit that I think the really good business folks understand it enough a lot of times, and they know at least the right questions to ask and the right things to look for to raise their hand. They might not always know the answer. I don't always know the answer, and I'm a lawyer.
We finally had a working plan where we were on A, X, and Z.
Yeah.
And what it was is we used, how do I simplify this? We were buying market agencies with zero money down. It was all contractual, but we were only participating in the uplift. So we were doing like an option contract with waterfall techniques. And they had all this technology or terminology inside of there. But what we would do is we'd come in and we'd agree upon a valuation now. They would get that valuation ownership shares in the overall company we were building. And then how we participated in that is we only got to participate in the uplift. And we had a way to calculate that uplift of not only just a multiple increase when we sold, because they were 4X to 12X, but we looked at our last 2 or 3 years of their trajectory and anything we could increase them above that because of cross-selling, upselling, and working with the other agencies. It's a very interesting thing because there are, especially in the tech world, there are constantly companies that are shutting down teams and divisions that are revenue generating, have a decent product. Maybe they're only, I mean, some of them are small, really small, $5-10 million a year in revenue to a multi-billion. If Google buys a company and they bought it because they wanted these 5 rock star engineers, and they do acqui-hire all the time.
Yep.
They'll buy a company just for these 5 engineers that happen to be there. They have 5 leading AI engineers, and Google wants them, so they buy their company they're working.
Well, that everywhere now.
Yeah, and one of the side projects over here is a $5 or $10 million revenue that they have. They'll just shut it in a blink of an eye, they'll shut it down. Because I know somebody, I've interviewed a couple guys that do divestitures. Basically, they hunt these things down. You're gonna have to build that team yourself. There's a good chance that you might get the product manager, and you might get some engineers that wrote it and some other stuff, but the ones I've seen, I've talked to probably 5 or 6 people that have done these, like, you don't always get the team.
No, and it's even beyond team, it's infrastructure, and it's the things you don't think about. So the payroll systems or the CRM systems, like a lot of that infrastructure is lumped together with the bigger corporation, and you're not really getting that because they don't have a dedicated team for that or a platform for that. And so there's a lot of pieces you have to stand up, and that's part of those deals that makes them difficult. It's difficult on the diligence side because you have to figure out what's coming, what isn't, what's vital and critical when you're evaluating the deal, and if it's not coming, that you can't do it. And then what services do you need that you're not going to get, you can live without, but that you need to bridge a period. So there's a lot of times what's called a transition services agreement that's put in place. I've seen them as little as a couple months to multi years, where you're essentially contracting with the company that this piece is coming from. And for IT services, he doesn't want to be the operator. He wants to sit on a board. He wants to help a little bit with M&A strategy, but really he wants to find targets and deploy capital. That's what he wants to do. And he needs a very different team around him than someone that is an operator themselves, and they want to buy business to be in it and operate it and be the CEO day to day and then build it from within. You have to identify that from the start and then figure out what you need, because a lot of people, and I'm sure you've seen this, but it's all over it, they don't do that, and then they get in a position where they just want to deploy capital and find businesses, and really what they bought is either too small, so they need to be the operator because they can't afford one, or doesn't have a management team, so they have to step in and do it. And I think that's how people get into bad deals a lot of times.
In this space, you own a business, you've got people's jobs on the line, stuff like that. Are you willing to cross that line and don't want to and don't need to, and get in and do something you need to do even though you don't want to? Because I hear that conversation all the time. It's passive. I'm going to stay behind. I'm going to be the operator. Like, yeah, until you're not.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't want to look at insurance policies for my business. That doesn't get me up in the morning to go do stuff. But guess what? I'm doing it because it's important and you have to. And I do think that there is this like fantasy dream of, I'm going to buy something and it's going to be passive, or I'm only going to get to do the fun stuff in it, where really there's a lot of stuff beneath that when you're working at a big company is kind of automated, or at least it's not automated, but it feels automated because you don't have to worry about it. Even a lot of times the CEOs or the senior executives in those companies don't have to worry about it because it's just such a big organization that it runs itself to where if you're in a small business or even a mid-sized business, $100 million business, a lot of times you're still rolling your sleeves up in areas you're not thinking about, or other people aren't, that are in big organizations or middle manager somewhere or whatever.